It's my DraftKings golf picks for the WGC Mexico Championship. We're starting right now. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Holkamaniacs YouTube channel. If this is your first time here and you're just looking to become a more profitable DraftKings player, start now by subscribing to the channel, but make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything along the way. And if you're already a Holkamaniac, you know exactly what time it is. Smash that like button, but better yet, if you want to get into my drawing for 20 DK bucks, make sure you stay until the end of the video so you know exactly what to drop into the comments. Holkamaniacs, I didn't forget about you guys for NBA All-Star break. I know that we do have an awesome golf crew in the community, so we're going to talk about the WGC Mexico Championship at Chapultepec today, and I do think it's a really interesting contest overall for these golfers. So let's talk about some players that we'll be targeting on this course in particular. It is a par 71, about 7,300 yards or so, and typically some of the golfers that I've found in my research that have really excelled here are going to be par 4 and par 5 scorers, and also ball strikers. You guessed it. That's one of the things we talk about nearly every week. But in terms of my model and kind of how I got to some of these plays, these are the things that I decided to put into my model this week and what really kind of ended up popping for this course in particular. But I am going to keep things relatively simple, believe it or not, this week. So some key metrics that I'll be targeting: strokes gained on approach shots. I'm also really going to weigh heavily, again, par 4 and par 5 scorers, but also strokes gained tee to green. Those are the two strokes gained metrics that I found were most predictive for this specific golf course, and we're going to bring that home with birdie or better scoring this week. Let's talk about some elite options first. So I will say that right off the bat, if you see a star next to a guy's name, I will say that they'll be cash viable in my opinion for this week. And Rory McIlroy, no surprise here. He is 11-5 on DraftKings. He has the best long-term adjusted round score in the entire field. I do think Rory is going to be extremely popular, and for good reason. We're going to have to find some value to make it work, but I certainly think that starting your week with Rory McIlroy will be a popular route. He is the highest outright odds to win, and I do think that if you're going to kind of target a guy that leads the field in total strokes gained, tee to green, I really think that he's just going to be one of those guys that I'll be building around this week for sure. Even at that price tag, it's really hard to get away from Rory, in my opinion. So we're going to start out hot with him, and we're going to bring it home with also Justin Johnson. He's 11,000. You get the $500 savings off of Rory McIlroy. He has won this event twice, so you'll see he is a cash viable option for me as well this week. Second best odds to win. You really can't go wrong with either of these guys. It's tough to get both into a lineup with the way scoring is, with the way pricing is this week. But I do think that if you can make it work, it might end up really working out this week. Elite par 5 and par 4 scorer. Dustin Johnson, we know both of these guys, either one could easily win this tournament. And I do think that if we wanted to focus at the top end this week with more of a stars and scrubs approach, it might end up really paying off. He is 15th in the field in terms of his strokes gained on tee to green. And I think that if we wanted to really kind of go, I guess maybe against the field a little bit, because I do think Dustin Johnson and Rory McIlroy are going to end up being the chalk. But Jon Rahm has just been playing amazing golf lately. He's 10-6, so you get a significant price discount if you want to move down to Rahm at 10-6 on DraftKings. He has the third highest outright odds as well. So if you really wanted to, if you needed that savings, I should say, I'm still totally comfortable with Rahm in cash games if you wanted to go that direction this week. He's 9th in strokes gained tee to green, so definitely not quite as elite as DJ and Rory in the category, but elite par 4 and par 5 scorer. We know this. Really no surprises here. He does have 2 top 20 finishes at this event. Moving down the salary spectrum a bit, top high-end options. So not quite the elite options, but do think that this range is actually jam-packed this week. And we're going to start with Webb Simpson. 9,800 on DraftKings. He does rank 4th in strokes gained on approach shots, 2nd in total strokes gained, and he does have an elite short game. That's the one thing that Simpson certainly has going for him each and every week, and he ranks 1st and 14th in par 4 and par 5 efficiency. So at 9,800, he could end up looking like a bargain this week, and I do think that he's cash viable as well. Xander Schauffele. We've been going after Xander quite a bit recently, and 9,400. Still, he's priced at a spot where I think he's reasonable this week. He is 7th in strokes gained tee to green. He is ranking 6th and 3rd in par 4 and par 5 efficiency, and he's the 6th best long-term adjusted round score in the field. So I guess those type of metrics overall at that price still has to have him in your core, in my opinion, this week. And I am going to be building around both of these guys if I end up not going superstars and scrubs. Tommy Fleetwood, another guy, like I said, this range is absolutely jammed in my opinion, but you do get a little bit of savings, $600 cheaper than Webb Simpson. He's 9,200. He ranks 8th in strokes gained tee to green and 12th in par 4 efficiency. he does have the 7th best long-term adjusted round score in the field. And I do think that if we wanted to really kind of go the course history route, he does have 3 top 20 finishes here. So 9,200, I definitely think Fleetwood could kind of gain some steam in the ownership realm as kind of the week progresses. Let's talk about some mid-range options this week, and I do think that this is a really interesting range. I'm not sure if it's my favorite range that we've talked about so far, but let's get right into it. I do think that Louis Oosthuizen is someone that I'm not really considering for cash games, but I do think at 8-9, he makes an interesting pivot for GPPs. He's 15th and 33rd in par 4 and par 5 efficiency. He does have the 12th best long-term adjusted round score, and he's 10th in birdies or better gained, bringing that home with 9th in birdies gained. So he is going to be a scorer for us. I guess don't know if they have as much consistency as some of the other golfers we've talked about so far, but I certainly have no problem with him in tournaments this week. Patrick Reed, that's another guy. In this range, if I was to kind of go the cash game route, I think just taking that $500 savings with Reed is something I'd be a little bit more interested in. 14th in strokes gained on approach shots. He is 1st and 33rd in par 4 and par 5 efficiency, and he's 8th in birdies or better gained over that time period. So Colin Morikawa, I do think that he's an interesting one in this range, but he's probably more of a borderline cash game option for me. I do think that I probably prefer Reed, but at 8,500, I certainly don't think that he needs to be out of your pool just yet. 1st in strokes gained on approach shots. That's a pretty elite metric to have at just 8,500 on DraftKings. He's 1st in birdies per tournament. He's 2nd in adjusted strokes on par 4s, and he also is 8th in adjusted strokes on par 5. So this is a pretty elite golfer for that price range, in my opinion, and really not a lot of people come near him in some of those categories, of course, but it's a really interesting spot because he has such elite long irons that can really help you on this golf course in particular. So I do think Morikawa squarely in play. Him and Patrick Reed, it's really just a toss-up in that range for cash games, in my opinion. All right, are we going to be able to make some of these Rory McIlroy and Dustin Johnson teams work? And we're going to need some value if that's going to happen. So Sungjae Im, I do think that at 7,900, he's one of the guys that really stood out to me. 10th in total strokes gained. He is 5th in birdies or better gained, and 11th and 16th in par 4 and par 5 efficiency. So for that price range, there's really not a lot down there that's super appealing this week. But I do think if you wanted just a mega punt, that he could be in play at 7,900. A lot of savings there. Scotty Scheffler, I feel like we've talked about him a decent amount over the last couple of weeks as well, and he's an $800 savings off of him, so I'm interested in that. 9th and 17th in par 4 and par 5 efficiency. He is 17th in strokes gained on approach shots, and he's 9th in total strokes gained. So I certainly think that he's kind of in that range to where, like, if it made kind of the roster work with some of the studs that you wanted, I got no issues paying down for Scheffler this week. Carlos Ortiz, 6,600. This is one that, again, another borderline cash play for me. I'm hoping that I don't have to go there, but he does have some metrics that really pop to me overall. He's 26th in strokes gained tee to green. He is 17th in total strokes gained. And if we just talking a little bit about just roster construction, I do think that he's someone that offers so much flexibility that he might be in play just to get in some of those other studs. He's 13th in eagles gained for what it's worth, but at least a little bit of upside there at 6,600. Let's talk about some potential pivot plays for GPPs. So I do think that Rory McIlroy at 11.5 is going to be extremely popular this week. And what about Jon Rahm as a pivot this week? So he's 10.6. I mentioned you get a decent amount of savings there. Rahm certainly has comparable upside to Rory, in my opinion, not just at this course, but really any golf course. And I do think that he could be 10 to 15% less owned than Rory. And that's his leverage that you could really use this week, and especially that savings that you get for it. I think it's interesting. Comparable metrics to Rory overall, but the salary really does matter in this week in particular when I don't love the value. Tommy Fleetwood, 9,200. What about pivoting to DeChambeau at 9K? I do think that Bryson's super interesting. Could be 10 to 15% less owned as well. So really trying to leverage the field off of Fleetwood in that kind of mid-range that I do actually really like, for the record. But Bryson, strong iron play at Genesis, and I do think that's something that we should really be focusing on this week that we've mentioned multiple times. And I do think that he has at least comparable upside to Fleetwood. That's what we're always trying to find at lower ownership, comparable odds. I do think that some of his metrics pretty similar overall, but I do think that we'll get Bryson at pretty low ownership in comparison to Fleetwood. Let's talk about even moving down the salary spectrum a bit, some other potential pivot plays for GPPs. So we talked about Morikawa at 8,500, some elite metrics, but what about Oosthuizen at 89? So two guys that we've already talked about today, but I do think that Oosthuizen could be at least 10 to 20% lower owned than Morikawa, which is something that I'm super interested in. Just paying that extra 400 to get that ownership leverage is something that makes a lot of sense. Strong recent form for Oosthuizen. One of the key factors that I haven't heard many people mention yet is Morikawa just has no experience on this golf course. So if that's the tiebreaker and we know that Usti is going to be lower owned, I'm totally fine taking that sort of pivot. Going all the way to the cheap side of things, we talked about Ortiz. He's probably my favorite guy if we wanted to get super thin down there. But at that point, maybe we just pivot to someone like Sebastian Munoz for 200 more. I do think he could be 5 to 10% lower owned than Ortiz, and I do think that it's a spot where, again, if it does end up being a chalky Carlos all the way down there in order to get to some of these other studs, I think I would prefer I'm always going to be pivoting at the lower end of the salary spectrum. I've made that very clear on other videos, so this is one that I'm at least looking at early in the week. Munoz does rank 14th in birdies or better gained. If you want to learn even more about how to be a profitable DraftKings player, make sure you hit the subscribe icon in the bottom right-hand corner now. And if you are interested in getting to that drawing for 20 DK bucks, drop into the comments your favorite Rory McIlroy pivot for the WGC Mexico Championship. I post the weekly winners on my Instagram story, so make sure you follow me while you're over there. And if you want more entries into this contest, I actually do choose from people that comment on Instagram posts with their DK handle as well. I'll see you guys next week.